my Foonatics, it is Fufu here and welcome to GBA Season 6 on this channel. I am the coach of Mewcastle United, one of the expansion teams for Season 6, and today we're going to be going through my draft. Yesterday it all happened live on stream, so today I'm going to go through kind of some of my thought processes of why I have drafted what I have drafted. So first of all, a little bit of history about my drafting kind of history and style. I've been in 2 leagues previously. The first one was the GBA D-League Season 1, and that's the time when drafts were kind of unrestricted and you could pick whatever you wanted from whatever tier and blah, blah. And so I had a very, very powerful team with things like Huron Black and Sylveon and Skarmory and making insane cores and stuff. And it was really fun, and I did really well, and I actually won that league, so that was cool as my first experience. And then just recently, I have finished PPL Season 3, and I went a bit more experimental in that I picked some things that I hadn't really seen used in draft format that much recently, and so I had Mega Blastoise combined with Talonflame, so I got a good rapid spin for a Talonflame to do stuff, and I went a bit more tactical with my drafting, and it worked out really, really well. I came second. I got a bit unlucky in a really crucial match, which kind of made me not get first place, but it's fine, and I'm not bitter at all because I was just really happy finding out how well the Pokemon that I drafted did, because I wasn't really sure what to expect. I thought that I was onto something. Turns out I kind of was. So off the back of those 2 successes, I want to continue that, obviously, but I also want to get even more experimental, potentially, because I feel like there are a lot of hidden gems, and to me, by now, it's pretty obvious which certain things are incredible in draft format, and picking just a whole roster of the really obvious picks would just not be fun for me at all. I want to pick some of the weirder stuff and see if that can work. So strap in, because you're in for a bumpy ride, potentially, but we're going to have a lot of fun and hopefully get a lot of wins along the way. So let's get right into the draft. I'm one of the expansion teams, so I had a very late pick in the draft, 14 out of 16. So I knew that my first pick may well not be what I wanted. I felt like I had to be very flexible. I didn't make extensive plans going into it. I knew that I'd have to react to what other people picked. But we had a chance at franchising a Pokemon first, because obviously I haven't drafted before in the GBA. What that meant was I could franchise something that was undrafted or that had previously been on a team that now no longer exists. So there were 5 people that left last season, and all the Pokemon on their teams just went into this pool that we could potentially pick one out of, and that was before the draft even begins, so it's basically a free pick. The issue is that would cost us some points. If you're not sure how the GBA draft works, it's all the Pokemon are tiered. Each tier costs a different amount of points, and it just depends on what you can afford at the end. So picking something in this franchise pick before the draft begins would cost me a few points. If you pick something from tier 1 and tier 2, it costs a bit more. I actually ended up picking something from tier 3 because it's a bit cheaper, and I thought it was very good value for what I wanted, and that Pokemon is Crocodile. What I like about this Pokemon in Draft League is it's got very decent speed, so it can speed creep certain things. If you want to run it bulky some weeks, you can do, because it's got decent bulk, a large HP pool, and very good abilities in Intimidate and Moxie. So Intimidate obviously helps it on the bulky side of things, so that's great. It gets Moxie and a very good attack stat with incredible stab moves. Knockoff and Earthquake are great because they're physical moves. They don't have any negatives in terms of recoil or dropping stats. They're 100% accurate, but they're both almost, well, Knockoff is almost 100 base power, Earthquake is 100 base power, so 2 very reliable, very powerful stab moves, good coverage, and Moxie to boost its attack stat. So it can be run offensive, it can be run defensive. It's got Stealth Rocks, which is a very good thing to have, and some other interesting support options available to it too. So I thought for a tier 3 franchise pick, before anyone else can have a go at picking Crocodile, I thought I'd pick it up, and I'm very happy with that pick. So moving on, now we're getting into the draft proper. And so we're going along, people are picking their first picks. I had my eye on something, quite liked the look of Huron Black, but unfortunately that was picked up by Nick, a friend of mine, Super Blah. You probably all know him because he's been in the GBA for the longest time. So that was unfortunate. But by the time the draft got to me, I saw that a very special little Pokemon was still left, and I was flabbergasted because I had 14th pick, and normally this thing goes within the first few, and that is Mew. I really like this Pokemon in draft. I don't know who doesn't. It has so much potential. It learns all the moves. It has base 100 across all the stats, so it can perform so many roles. It's incredible. As a first pick, you kind of need something that you could bring every week, and Mew is definitely something that you can bring every single week. So I really like it. It used to be seen as one of, if not the best Pokemon in draft format when everyone was a bit more naive and didn't know as much about it, and it definitely can be, but you need to draft well around it, because if you miss a certain thing on your team, like hazard removal or stealth rock setter, things like that, no special wall, no physical wall, Mew will then have to perform that role every week, and that limits it so much when it has this huge potential. So I want to make sure that I do not do that. I want to make sure that on a certain week, if I want to bring a Nasty Plot Mew, I can bring a Nasty Plot Mew. On a certain week, if I want to bring a defensive Mew, I can bring that. I want to be able to use Mew how I want to use it. There are some really cool sets that I want to try out and see if they work. You'll have to wait and see, because I don't want to give my opponents any hints as to what I might be bringing. But yeah, I'm going to try and draft really well and show everyone that Mew does deserve to be in the top 5, maybe, picks for drafts. I really like it, and I think it's a huge threat. So Mew is the first pick for Mewcastle United. Yeah, I know, it's kind of a mascot pick, but we'll get a roll with it. So pick number 2 was actually another Pokemon from Tier 3, joining Crocodile there. This is something that I thought it was very important to get early on, and that is Crobat. It's so good, and I know it goes quite early in drafts because people know how good it is. And that's because it's a very reliable defogger, which is something that I definitely need after having picked Mew. I can't rely on Mew for defog every week, so I knew that I wanted to pick something with that straight away, and that is Crobat. Crobat is so reliable because of its speed. Its speed is incredible, and you can run it bulky because it's got decent bulk if you invest in it. But you can also run it offensive because it has Stab Brave Bird, which hits so hard. It has relatively good coverage options, and it has U-Turn to give you some momentum. But speed is so important in Draft League, and I can't emphasize that enough. It's because everyone has to speed creep. If someone doesn't have something base 130 speed or higher, then they will have to run a Scarfer to try and outspeed Crobat, and that will limit that Pokemon's ability. So it's very, very good to have. It also means that Crobat may well be able to come Adamant some weeks when I don't need to run it so fast, and that will allow me to hit even harder. So that's really good. I love Crobat, and it has a lot of potential. Again, it's got status moves like Toxic, Taunt, Reliable Recovery, and Roost, and it has stuff like Super Fang too. It's really cool, and I like it, and I think it's going to perform well. It also has incredible synergy with Crocodile. The things that Crobat's weak to, Crocodile is immune to Psychic, it's immune to Electric, and it also resists Rock types. Things that Crocodile is weak to: Fighting, Grass, Bug. Crobat quad resists. It also resists what does that also resist? Oh yeah, Fairy. The issue is that they're both weak to Ice, but I can patch that up later. Absolutely fine. So yeah, happy so far. Everything's going to plan. My third pick in this draft, well, fourth overall really because of my franchise, and that is going to be Kyurem, which is the alternative to Kyurem Black that I was looking at. It's a much cheaper alternative because again it's tier 3, which means I'm going into my free picks and spending some of my points, but I think Kyurem is definitely worth that because it is terrifying. It has base 130 in both offensive stats, so you can run it physical or special, but probably most likely mixed because that's where it really excels. The only difference between it and Kyurem Black that I really think is significant is obviously Kyurem Black has a lot higher attack stat and also access to Fusion Bolt. So that's the main thing that you need to be aware of there. But Kyurem, regular Kyurem, actually has a slightly higher base special attack, so that's useful. And it also still has the base 125 HP. So it's incredibly bulky even without investing in its HP. So that's really good. I really like this Pokemon as a wall breaker and just as a bulky attacker, sub-attacker. Again, reliable recovery with Roost. So far, I have 3 things that have Roost, which is great. And I'm really looking forward to using Kyurem as just a powerhouse. I think that I've got support for it as well that will work. So that's really great, and I like Kyurem. Moving on to my 4th pick and 5th pick overall with the franchise, blah, blah, blah. I felt like I needed a more reliable, dedicated wall. So far, I have all the things that can be run bulky, but really Mew is the only thing that could be considered a proper wall, I suppose. And I don't want to have to rely on that to be a wall every week. So, I'm going to pick Suicune, the biggest, bulkiest water out there, arguably. It has to rely on rest for recovery, but that's okay because it is bulky enough to do that, generally. But it also has a number of other options, as always, because I like considering all the options, and I will be saying that for pretty much every Pokemon, because I like to see the potential. But Suicune, I think it has maybe fewer options than some other water types, but because of its lack of recovery. But it can do some interesting things. It has respectable special attack, so you can run it offensive if you want to. If that opportunity comes, I may well consider that. And there are other things that I will consider with Suicune as well. I don't want you to groan when you see Suicune, because I'm going to endeavour to use it interestingly and creatively when it is appropriate. So please stay tuned and don't prejudge. People prejudged for when I picked stuff like a Jirachi Togekiss core in my last league, and I did not use or abuse Serene Grace. There was one battle when it came into play, and literally apart from that, I don't think that Serene Grace even activated, really. So I don't spam horrible tactics. I try to play interestingly, because this is as much for you guys to enjoy as it is for me to enjoy Pokemon. So I'm doing it for you. So we'll move on to our next pick now, which is pick number 6. And I'm going to get a grass type. And I also wanted a bit more speed. I've only got Crobat that has above base 100 speed, and I like to have more options than that. So I'm going to pick Virizion. I like this thing. It's a good grass type. It's got very good special defense, which can be used very well. It also has powerful stab attack in close combat on the physical side. It can hit on the physical and the special side, which is always useful, and has setup on both sides too in Carmine and Sword Dance. It has reliable recovery again. So I think it's a really interesting Pokemon to use. It also dissuades people from using Knockoff, because I can potentially get an attack boost if they do that. So that's a very useful thing to have. But really, I like Virizion because of the speed. It's a very nice thing to have a fast fighting type. And I think it fills a hole on my team very nicely. So Virizion is coming. The next pick is going to be Klefki. Klefki is another thing that I can use as a wall because I need a few more of them. It doesn't have the reliable recovery, but it has so many support options, and I have some tricks up my sleeve with Klefki. Its stats aren't amazing, but it's mitigated by Prankster, which is obviously why you would pick Klefki, and also beautiful typing for a defensive Pokemon. The typing just fits so well with my team. I had my eye on Klefki for a long time. I just knew that it wouldn't get drafted until later, so I felt like I could wait. This is a tier 2 Pokemon, so again, I'm going to be dropping some points to catch Klefki, but I do like Klefki, and I think that it can do some really interesting things. Hopefully people won't see it coming because it's not been used to its full potential from what I've seen in the GBA. So yeah, I want to catch some people off guard with my Trixie Klefki. Again, I needed something for certain types, so like Bird Spam I needed something for. I didn't have anything really to switch on dragons yet, so it's filling some typing synergy issues that I was having but now don't really have anymore because Klefki is great. So very happy with that. So we're getting towards the end of my draft. I still have some of the lower tier Pokemon to consider. I don't have as many points to spend either, so I may well have to dip further into the lower tiers to try and save some points. And yeah, I don't have my mega yet, so you guys can be considering what my mega might be. What do you think might fill some good roles on my team? I'd be interested to see what you guys think at this stage. Anyways, the next Pokemon I'm going to pick is actually another tier 4 Pokemon, so I'm going to be spending some of my points on this, and that will leave me with 100 points left, because this is 80 points, so I'll have 100 points left to spend on my one remaining free Pokemon. But this Pokemon is going to be Electros. I don't have an electric type yet. I like Electros because it's very bulky. It doesn't have any weaknesses aside from maybe a Mold Breaker ground type. So it's rarely going to go down to one hit, which means that it'll be able to perform its job very well, which is generally a slow Volt Switch or threatening things with its vast coverage. It has good special and physical coverage and high stats in both, so that's really useful. But I like it for the slow Volt Switch or U-turn, because then I get to go into one of my threats for free, so that's really useful to do. So yeah, really cool Pokemon. I like its design as well in Gen 6 because it's all like wormy and squirmy and it's really cool. So we're going to be using Electros. For my next pick, I'm looking at tier 5. I want to get something that I will actually bring to battles, because in tier 5 you're getting to Pokemon that maybe aren't as viable. But if you pick a tier 5 that you don't end up using, then you have wasted that pick. And I wanted something that I like and that I know how to use, and that I think I will be able to use well, and that is going to be Kecleon. This little critter is just such a dude. He has reliable recovery in Recover, and he has a good special defense stat with 130 special defense. But obviously, the main appeal of Kecleon is the Protean ability, meaning that any attacks it goes for, it gets Stab. And that is so good. It's only got base 90 attack, but with Stab on all of its attacks and knowing what your opponent might bring so that you can bring super effective coverage for it, you're going to be having Stab super effective attacks against a lot of their team, which is very, very powerful in these battles. It also has some support options. It gets some status moves. It gets Stealth Rock, which means that I'm further removing pressure on Mew and Crocodile to run Stealth Rock. So I really like Kecleon. It also gives me a bit more priority, because so far I'm relying on like unstab priority off Mew, maybe a rogue quick attack off Crobat and Virizion, and Klefki's prankster ability. So Kecleon actually gives me some stab priority, which is very useful. And I really like Kecleon, so hopefully he's going to be doing some work. So with only 2 picks remaining, I still haven't picked my Mega, and this right here is when it is going to happen. So brace yourselves, because I'm going to be picking a tier 4 Mega in Mega Bayonet. What that means is Mega Bayonet is in the lowest tier of Megas because it's thought to be one of the least viable Megas that you can pick. I heartily disagree with that, and I'm very prepared to prove people wrong. But because it is in tier 4, it gives me 80 extra points for my final pick. So I think that this is such value, because I think Mega Bayonet is a good Pokemon, which I'll explain why in a second, but it also is allowing me to then pick a tier 1 as my last pick, so you can be thinking on what that might be. But anyway, Mega Bayonet, it's so cool. It's probably the Pokemon, the Mega that I fell in love with very first. When we first played X and Y, that was the Mega that I loved the design of, and I really like the idea behind it as well. It's Prankster, it's a tricksy ghost type, it's awesome. So it has all sorts of status moves that it can use, but obviously the main appeal is that Prankster Destiny Bond, being able to mutually guarantee another Pokemon to faint is fantastic. So yeah, I really like that about it, but you can play all sorts of tricks with it. It's got so many interesting things that it can do. I'm not going to delve into too much detail. I don't want to be giving my opponents hints, but it also has that lovely, huge base attack stat, so anything like a knockoff or a Shadow Claw coming from it is going to hurt like hell. It has priority options in Shadow Sneak and Sucker Punch, and a few interesting coverage options as well that could definitely prove handy to bring. So I'm really hoping Mega Bayonet will do a lot of work. I think that it probably will be matchup based, so I won't necessarily be able to bring Mega Bayonet every week, but that's fine because it's a tier 4 and it's allowing me to pick up another tier 1, and yeah, I think it's just great value, and I'm very excited to use it in Draft League because, again, it's something that I haven't really seen other people use, and so I can tread this new ground on my own, and you guys can be around to watch it, which is fantastic. So, for my final pick, I have another Tier 1 option, and there were a few things that I was considering. I really enjoyed using Talonflame in the PPL, and because it's just, the priority is fantastic, but I already have priority with Mega Bayonet, Kecleon, and Prankster users in Klefki, so I felt like it wasn't super necessary to pick Talonflame for that reason. It would give me Bird Spam with Crobat and Talonflame, which would be an interesting combination to consider, but I just felt like it wasn't necessary, and I already have a couple of things that are weak to rocks, so I didn't want to add to that with a thing that's super weak to rocks. There were other things that I was considering, but a lot of things I already had filled that role. What I did end up going with is Dragonite. And I feel like this is something that people shy away from a lot in Draft League, which I don't really know why, but people don't like drafting things that perform similar roles, because I already have a Dragon type, a powerful Dragon type in Kyurem. Both Dragonite and Kyurem are extremely powerful Dragon types. That's what they have in common. But I don't think it's a negative thing to draft them in tandem, because when you bring them both to a match and your opponent has one Dragon check, you can use one Dragon to kill the Dragon check, and then you still have another Dragon for which they do not have a check to, which is fantastic. I think that this can work so well. It was actually my plan from the beginning to try for Dragon spam. I wanted to try that because I think that it's a really interesting tactic that a lot of people may not be able to draft well enough for. You're trying to cover options, but you may not be covering like a double Dragon thing. So I'm hoping that it's going to work. They're both very powerful wall breakers. Dragonite also gives me a very scary setup Pokemon. I do have setup already in terms of Nasty Plot and Swords Dance Mew, Swords Dance Virizion, but it's not speed boosting even, which Dragonite can do. It has the Dragon Dance, which can just sweep teams, and it's relatively easy to get off because you do have the Marble Scale. So Dragonite is a scary Pokemon to add to this roster. It gives me extreme speed too, which is always nice, and also as an interesting special move pool that people might not see coming. So that's going to round off Mewcastle United's draft for the GBA Season 6. I feel like this is definitely my most alternative draft yet, just because of those last two picks, kind of sealing the feel that I was going for with this team, which is two powerful Dragon types with lots of other things that can support them very well and get chip damage where it's necessary, cripple opponents' Pokemon, take out certain checks so that one of those Dragon types can put in the work. But that's not to say that everything else on my team can't be a huge threat in and of itself. So that's the team. I hope you guys are behind it. I hope you guys kind of get what I was going for. And I'll try to prove to you that my vision will work. I've got very stiff competition in GBA Season 6. All the coaches are of very high caliber, which just means that the battles are going to be intense and awesome, so you have amazing content to look forward to. Lucky you! Lucky you! I'm so excited and hyped for this right now. I hope you guys are too. So please stick around and give me some love, because it makes me happy. Anyways, I've been Fufu, you've been awesome, and hopefully see you next time. Goodbye!